I want to start today by speaking directly to a very specific and probably a very tired segment of our audience.
Hmm.
If you are an MDiv student or a teaching pastor or, a biblical scholar, you know exactly what the inside of a study looks like on a Tuesday morning,
Oh, yeah, the classic Tuesday morning grind.
right? The coffee is getting cold, the commentaries are piled up everywhere. You are staring at this massive, intimidating block of the Greek New Testament, and you are just stuck.
Completely paralyzed by the text.
Exactly.
Oh,
You've got your lexicons open, trying to build an entire sermon outline, and then you realize you have just spent, the better part of an hour trying to parse one single obstinate verb.
we've all been there.
You're deep in the syntactical weeds, you triumphantly identify a second aorist active indicative, you map out all the morphology, and then it hits you. You have completely lost the author's actual train of thought.
Yeah, it is a really common occupational hazard for us.
It is, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, we are trained to operate like pathologists, essentially. We take the text, we put it on a glass slide it right under a microscope, and we isolate the smallest possible cellular structure, the individual word.
Right.
But by isolating that single word, we inadvertently kill the organism. We diagnose the cell, sure, but we lose the living architecture of the discourse.
Man, that is the perfect way to frame the problem. We treat the text like a dead specimen on a dissection table instead of a living, breathing artifact of meaning.
Precisely.
So today we are taking a completely different approach. We are doing a deep dive into the architecture of language itself. Our primary guide for this is Chapter 8 of M.A.K. Halliday and Christian Matheson's foundational work on Systemic Functional Linguistics. Or, SFL, as we'll probably just call it.
Yeah, SFL is much easier to say.
For sure. And the chapter itself is titled Group and Phrase Complexes. But we aren't just staying in the realm of theory. We are going to synthesize that framework with Constantine Campbell's model of verbal aspect.
Which is just a brilliant pairing, by the way.
It really is. And we'll be applying this whole apparatus directly to the Gospel of John and 1 John, specifically looking at it in the Koine Greek.
Right, because the goal here is to really bridge the gap between abstract linguistics and the practical, everyday demands of the pulpit.
Yes.
I mean, SFL isn't concerned with merely labeling parts of speech. It is fundamentally concerned with how speakers and writers package information to construe human experience.
Okay, construe human experience. I like
Yeah, and when you combine that functional approach with Campbell's insights into how the Koine Greek handles spatial perspective and aspect, you suddenly stop looking at this flat string of isolated vocabulary words. You start seeing a three-dimensional blueprint of the author's mind.
Okay, I love that. So let's lay the theoretical foundation first. Halliday and Matheson introduced this concept of the rank scale.
Yes, the rank scale is crucial.
Because in traditional formal grammar, I feel like we are often taught to read just totally linearly. Subject, verb, object, period. Move on to the next sentence.
All right, it's very flat, very sequential.
But SFL suggests language actually operates on a dimensional hierarchy. And the way I've been trying to wrap my head around it, preparing for this deep dive, is by picturing Russian nesting dolls.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, because the outermost largest doll is the clause complex, what we might loosely call a compound sentence in traditional terms. You open that large doll up, and inside you find the clause. Inside the clause are groups and phrases, and inside those are words and eventually morphemes.
The nesting doll analogy captures the essence of constituency in SFL perfectly. A unit at one rank is made up of units from the rank directly below it.
Right.
But what Chapter 8 specifically explores is a phenomenon they call complexing.
Complexing.
Yeah. This is what happens when those smaller internal units, so the groups and phrases, when they link up with each other directly without generating a whole new upper-level clause.
Okay, so staying with the nesting doll analogy, it's like two of the mid-sized nesting dolls deciding to, hold hands inside the larger doll. Rather than forcing you to carve an entirely new large doll just to hold the second mid-sized one.
Yes, that is exactly it. You are expanding horizontally at a lower rank rather than building a new vertical structure.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the text uses two specific terms for how these units connect: taxes and logico-semantic relations.
Right?
From my reading, taxes seems to describe the structural power dynamic between the units.
That's a good way to put it. It defines the degree of interdependency. And we really have two options here, parataxis and hypotaxis.
Okay, break those down for us.
Sure. So parataxis is a relationship of equal peer-to-peer status. In the SFL literature, they denote this using numerical sequencing. So you'd see a 1 followed by a caret symbol, then a 2. So 1 caret 2.
Got it. So they are on equal footing.
Exactly. Think of coordinated elements where either side could theoretically fulfill the grammatical function independently. They're co-stars in the sentence.
Right.
Hypotaxis, on the other hand, is a relationship of unequal status. And we denote this with Greek letters instead of numbers. You have an alpha element, which is the dominant primary unit, and a beta element, which is dependent. That beta element exists to modify or expand or maybe restrict the alpha element, but it cannot stand on its own in the same functional capacity.
Okay, so if taxis is the structural power dynamic, whether they are equals with numbers or unequals with Greek letters, then logico-semantic relations describe the actual flavor or purpose of that relationship, right? Like, why are they linking up in the first place?
Precisely. What is the logical meaning of their connection?
Right. And Halliday breaks this down into projection and expansion. And then expansion gets divided into 3 subcategories. I want to make sure I'm tracking with these because this is where it gets a little dense.
It does. Let's walk through them.
Okay. The first is elaboration, which they denote with an equal sign. This seems to function kind of like a magnifying glass. The second unit is restating or specifying the first unit.
That is correct. So if I say in English, my supervisor, the director of operations, the second nominal group simply provides a higher resolution image of the first.
Right. They refer to the exact same experiential entity. The equal sign makes perfect sense there.
Exactly.
Then we have extension, denoted by a plus sign. This one feels pretty straightforward. It's additive. You are bringing new entities or alternatives into the complex.
Yep, you are adding to the picture. 1 plus 2.
And finally, enhancement, which uses a multiplication sign. This is when the second element modifies the first by adding, like, circumstantial constraints. Time, space, manner, or cause.
You've got it. It multiplies the circumstantial meaning.
Okay, but I have to ask the question that I just know our listeners are thinking right now.
Let's hear it.
We are talking about alphas, betas, ones, twos, equal signs, and multiplication signs. I mean, this borders on linguistic algebra.
It really does look like math on the page.
Right. So why can't the biblical authors just write simple, declarative primary school sentences? Why do we need this massive architectural framework just to read the Gospel of John?
It's a very fair question. The short answer is textual compression.
Textual compression.
Yeah. Think about it. If an author only utilized simple, uncomplexed clauses, the narrative would become impossibly fractured. It would sound like a robot speaking. Jesus went. Jesus saw. Jesus wept.
Right. Very disjointed.
And human experience isn't like that. It's fluid and it's intertwined.
Oh.
By utilizing group and phrase complexes, so linking elements below the clause level, the author can package a tremendous amount of experiential data while maintaining a single, unified textual message.
Wow, okay.
So when we map out this linguistic algebra, as you called it, we are actually reverse engineering the author's stylistic choices. We are observing exactly what they chose to elevate to the primary level and what they deliberately chose to compress or subordinate.
Okay, that is fascinating. Let's take that theoretical lens and cross the bridge directly into the Greek text. Because if compression is about mapping human experience efficiently, let's look at how John maps the actual people in his narrative.
Good place to start.
The source material highlights John's use of nominal complexes to track participants. And John 1.40 is a prime example. This is the introduction of Andrew.
All right, so the Greek text there reads, on dras ho adelphos, Simonos peh true, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter.
Okay, applying the SFL framework we just went over, this is elaborating parataxis.
Exactly.
We have 2 nominal groups holding hands as equals, 1 equals 2. The proper noun Andrew is the primary head, the 1. The appositional phrase, the brother of Simon Peter, is the secondary head, the 2. But what stands out to me here is the narrative strategy. John is in his first chapter. He is rapid fire introducing a massive cast of characters to the reader. If he had used separate clauses, there's a man named Andrew who's the brother of Simon Peter, he dilutes the narrative momentum.
He slows the whole thing down.
Right. So instead, he bolts an unfamiliar participant directly to a highly recognizable participant.
Yes. He anchors the unknown to the known, and he does it without sacrificing that single textual pulse. The discourse function here is rapid participant tracking.
That makes so much sense.
But the dynamic changes significantly when we move from elaboration to extension.
Right, the plus sign.
Exactly. The text brings up John 2.1, which represents just a fascinating sociological and grammatical maneuver.
Let me pull that up. Okay, the text says, after this, he descended to Capernaum, he and his mother and his brothers and his disciples. Now, the verb is ka-te-h-be, he descended, which is singular.
Right, singular verb.
But the participant group is massive. It's he, which is 1, and his mother, plus 2, and his brothers, plus 3, and his disciples, plus 4.
Yes. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4.
To fully grasp what John is doing here, though, we need to bring in Constantine Campbell's verbal aspect model. How does Campbell handle a verb like ka-te-ej?
This is where it gets really exciting. Campbell's framework is a necessary corrective to traditional paradigms. The paradigms that treat Greek indicative verbs as primarily encoding absolute time, past, present, or future.
Which is how most of us were taught, honestly.
Oh, absolutely. But Campbell demonstrates that Greek indicatives are actually encoding spatial perspective and aspect, not absolute time.
Okay, distinguish those for us.
Spatial perspective deals with proximity versus remoteness. Is the author bringing the action right into the reader's immediate vantage point, making it proximate? Or is the author keeping it at a distance, making it remote?
Right.
An aspect deals with perfective versus imperfective. Is the action viewed from the outside as a complete, unified whole? That's perfective. Or is it viewed from the inside as an ongoing, unfolding process? That's imperfective.
I always conceptualize this using a camera lens analogy.
Look at it.
Well, under Campbell's model, the aorist tense is perfective remote. So I picture an aerial helicopter shot. The camera is high up above the action, which creates the remoteness, and it captures the entire event from beginning to end as a single complete dot on the timeline, which is the perfective aspect.
That's brilliant.
It's like you see the entire army cross the river in one sweep. You don't see the individual footprints in the mud.
I love that. And because the aorist provides that sweeping macroscopic view of completed events, Campbell argues it carries the narrative mainline. It is the structural backbone of the discourse, moving the plot sequentially from point A to point B.
Okay. Conversely, then, the imperfect tense is imperfective remote. It remains in the narrative past, it's still remote, but it zooms the camera all the way in.
Yeah.
It's a steady cam shot down on the ground. We are now inside the action, watching it unfold. And because we are zoomed in on an ongoing process, the narrative mainline basically pauses.
Exactly. The imperfect takes us offline to provide background or setting or concurrent circumstance.
Okay, so bearing that crucial distinction in mind, let's return to John 2.17. The verb ka-te-h-be is an aorist indicative, so it is perfective remote. It operates as the helicopter shot advancing the narrative mainline. Jesus moves from point A to point B,
Right.
but observe the extending paratactic complex attached to it. John groups 4 distinct social entities into a single grammatical unit and attaches it to one singular mainline verb.
He essentially creates a macro participant.
A macro participant.
Yeah. Think about it. He doesn't say, Jesus went down, then his mother went down, then the disciples followed. That would create sequential, fractured events.
Right, it would be a parade of individuals.
Exactly. By packaging them as 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 against a singular verb, he forces the reader to view them as a unified collective.
Wow. The theological and sociological implications of that are profound.
They really are. At this specific stage in the narrative, John is instructing the reader not to view these groups as fragmented factions. They are a single, composite entity moving along the narrative mainline together.
That is amazing. And traditional parsing notes just call it a compound subject and move on.
Totally. They miss the deliberate architecture of community that John has engineered right into the syntax itself.
That is a completely different way to approach sermon prep. You aren't preaching a fragmented message about the individual obedience of the disciples. You are preaching the collective, unified movement of the early Jesus community.
It changes everything. And we see a similar theological compression in hypotactic complexes where the relationship is unequal. The source text points to 1 John 2.2.
Oh, yes. He is the propitiation for our sins, not for ours only, but also for the whole world.
Right. If we look at the prepositional phrase, for our sins, serves as the primary alpha element.
Okay.
John then extends it hypotactically. Not for ours only, which is still part of the alpha, but also for the whole world. That's the beta element.
So it is an enhancement, expanding the scope of the propitiation.
Yes. And note the primary verb here. It is a present indicative, which Campbell classifies as imperfective proximate.
Okay, so imperfective proximate. That brings the ongoing reality directly into the immediate spatial proximity of the reader.
Exactly. It is a present close-up reality. By attaching a hypotactic prepositional complex to this proximate verb, John takes a massive foundational theological truth and expands its scope outward to the cosmos, all without breaking the emotional intensity of a single clause.
He maintains the textual pressure.
He does. He refuses to let the reader off the hook by starting a new sentence.
Man. So nouns and prepositional phrases build the participants in the scope, but verbs build the action, and the SFL text introduces verbal group complexes.
This is a huge shift.
It is. This is where verbs start linking up to construe a single process. And this seems to be another area where traditional grammars just really struggle. They often write off secondary verbs as simple complements and call it a day.
Yeah, formal grammar often lacks a vocabulary to explain how two distinct verbs function experientially as a single event. But SFL provides that vocabulary. Let's look at phased verbal complexes.
Okay.
These fall under elaboration. So alpha equals beta. John 13.5 during the foot washing narrative is a prime example of this.
Okay, the Greek there is earxato enipitein, he began to wash.
Right. In this hypotactic elaborating complex, the primary verb, the alpha, is earxato, he began. It establishes the point of inception. The secondary verb, the beta, is enipitein, to wash. Now, SFL recognizes that experientially, Jesus is not doing two different things. He's in beginning and also washing.
Right. It is one single event phased at its origin. But how does Campbell's verbal aspect model illuminate this specific pairing?
Well, look at the tenses. The primary verb, earklato, is an aorist indicative.
Perfective remote, the helicopter shot.
Exactly. It advances the narrative mainline. It acts as the spark that ignites the event. But the secondary verb, enipitein, is a present infinitive. The present tense grammaticalizes imperfective aspect.
Oh, wow. So the grammar captures both the decisive initiation and the ongoing duration at the same time.
Yes.
The aorist mainline verb violently kicks off the action, but the imperfective secondary verb specifies that the foot washing was an open-ended, continuous process. We get the inception and the duration simultaneously.
It perfectly maps the humility of Christ. He didn't just wash one foot and move on, check a box. He initiated a durative process of servitude.
That will preach.
It really will. Now, consider what happens when verbs link up through extension. So, alpha plus beta. We see this in conative complexes, which combine an attempt with a target goal.
This brings us to John 10.39, and honestly, this example completely rewrites standard commentary on the verse for me.
It's a game changer.
The English translates as, they were seeking again to seize him. The Greek is a-z-a-y-tune, p-a-h-psi.
Right. The primary verb, a-z-a-y-tune, they were seeking, is the conative attempt. That's the alpha. It is extended by the secondary infinitive psi to seize, which is the target goal, the beta.
Okay.
The critical key here is the aspect of the primary verb. A-z-a-y-tune is an imperfect indicative.
Which means it is imperfective remote. It is the Steadicam shot. It is entirely offline.
Yes. And precisely because it is offline, John is signaling structurally that this conative attempt did not reach completion on the narrative mainline.
Oh, man. The hostility is durative, it is intense, but it is fundamentally impotent. Jesus escapes in the very next clause. If a pastor preaches that verse as a completed historical fact, they tried to seize him, they flattened the narrative tension, the Greek structure is essentially prophesying that the opponents cannot capture him until his hour has come. The grammar itself preaches the sovereignty of Christ over the timeline.
That is the analytical power of synthesizing SFL with verbal aspect. You perceive the theological machinery operating right beneath the surface of the text.
It's incredible. We also see this in causative complexes, right? Which use enhancement alpha multiplied by beta, like John 6.2. Make the people sit down.
Right. The primary verb is an aorist imperative. It carries perfective aspect and a remote command, demanding immediate, unified execution from the disciples as the initiators.
And we see projection in John 5.6 at the pool of Bethesda. Jesus asks the invalid, "Do you want to become well?"
That's a fascinating one.
SFL categorizes this differently than expansion, right? A mental process, want, projects a proposal, become well, but the primary verb want is a present indicative.
Meaning it is imperfective proximate?
Exactly. Jesus projects this question directly into the immediate spatial proximity of the invalid. It's an ongoing, present confrontation right up in his personal space.
It radically alters the tone of the scene. It isn't a distant philosophical inquiry from a rabbi. It is an immediate, proximate demand for engagement.
Wow. Okay, so if we are in the business of unlearning traditional parsing habits today, and it seems like we definitely are.
We are indeed.
We have to tackle periphrasis and the historical present. I remember sitting in first-year Greek, learning periphrastic constructions, combining an auxiliary verb like to be with the participle. We were always taught to look at the auxiliary verb to determine the tense and aspect of the phrase.
Yeah, that's standard textbook stuff.
Ooh.
But Campbell's rule of spatial value demonstrates why that traditional approach is just fundamentally flawed.
Okay, lay that out for us.
In a periphrastic construction, the auxiliary verb, which is typically a form of me, is especially vague. It essentially functions as empty space, structurally speaking. It carries no especial weight. Yes, the entire aspectual and spatial value of the construction derives solely from the participle.
So the participle is doing all the heavy lifting, and the auxiliary verb is just there for, structural support.
Precisely. Let's apply this to John 1.28. These things happened in Bethany beyond the Jordan, where John was baptizing. The Greek phrase for was baptizing is ein baptizing zone.
Okay, so the auxiliary verb is ein, which is the imperfect form of to be. But under Campbell's rule, we ignore it for the purpose of determining aspect.
Right, we look exclusively at the participle, baptizing,
which is a present participle, meaning it grammaticalizes imperfective aspect.
Exactly, because the participle dictates the value. The entire periphrastic construction functions as imperfective remote. It takes the reader entirely off the main line.
Because the preceding clause utilized an aorist verb. These things happened, which was moving the mainline narrative forward.
Yes. But then John downshifts into periphrasis. He establishes a continuous, offline background setting. John the Baptist's ministry isn't portrayed as a single blip on a timeline. It is the durative atmospheric backdrop against which the mainline actions of the incarnate Word are occurring.
That provides immense clarity. You just look at the participle and you immediately know where you are in relation to the narrative mainline.
It's a very clean rule.
But that brings us to, honestly, the most debated grammatical feature in New Testament studies, the historical present.
Oh boy, here we go.
The sudden use of a present tense verb right in the middle of a past tense narrative. The standard line in most commentaries and classrooms is that the author uses the historical present for vividness, to make the story jump off the page.
Yeah, the vividness explanation, I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
But it is a psychological category masquerading as a linguistic one. It is entirely subjective. What one reader finds vivid, another might find completely tedious. If we want to understand how language works, we need a structural, morphological explanation for why the author abruptly shifts gears like that.
And Campbell defines the historical present not as a tool for vividness, but as an imperfective proximate spill. I love that phrase, proximate spill.
It's very descriptive.
Right.
Recall that the narrative mainline is driven by the aorist, which is remote. We are in the helicopter. But suddenly the author drops a present indicative verb into the text. The present is imperfective, and crucially, it is proximate.
So it ruptures the narrative distance.
Exactly.
It pulls the reader out of the helicopter and drops them right onto the street level.
It forces the reader's vantage point into immediate proximity. And John uses this technique with extreme structural precision. He typically pairs the proximate spill with verbs of propulsion.
Verbs of propulsion, like what?
Verbs like bleh he sees, or leh he says, or ketai he comes. When John combines this aspectual shift with a propulsion verb, he's establishing a major structural boundary in the discourse.
The source notes point to John 1.29 as the classic example of this. On the next day, he sees Jesus coming to him and says, "We have two historical presents right back to back, bleh and leh.
And notice the surrounding architecture there. On the next day, that's a temporal adjunct. John pairs a temporal shift with propulsion verbs and approximate spill. He is initiating a massive new episode in the narrative.
Right. The prologue and the background setting of John the Baptist are complete.
Yes. The spatial perspective suddenly shifts to immediate proximity as the earthly ministry of Jesus formally begins. It is a structural boundary marker, not merely a stylistic flourish for vividness.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for our listeners today, the pulpit payoff. Because how does a pastor sitting in their study on a Thursday morning take all of this, the SFL rank scale, parataxes and hypotaxes, Campbell's aspectual models, proximate spills, and actually use it to outline a text and preach a sermon?
It's the million-dollar question, and the immediate payoff is structural confidence.
Structural confidence. Tell me more about that.
Well, if you understand that John utilizes proximate spill historical presence paired with temporal adjuncts to mark discourse transitions.
Yeah.
You no longer have to consult 5 different commentaries to guess where a scene begins or ends.
Wow.
The grammar provides the outline for you. When you hit John 1.29, that is where your next major sermon point begins.
It gives you the author's own exegetical map.
Precisely. And beyond that, it protects you from preaching exegetical fallacies.
Yeah.
We discussed the conative imperfects in John 10.
Right, the seeking to seize him.
If you recognize the offline, imperfective nature of the enemy seeking to seize Jesus, you don't preach a generic message about historical facts. You preach the theological tension of an unfulfilled threat. You show the congregation that the enemies of Christ were powerless to force the mainline narrative.
That is so good. Furthermore, when you encounter the macro participants, so the extending paratactic complexes like Jesus, his mother, his brothers, and his disciples in John 2, you honor the textual compression.
Exactly.
You preach about the unified movement of the community rather than fracturing the text into isolated moral lessons about different individuals. Halliday and Matheson emphasize that authors possess a compression versus expansion scale.
Yes, and this is a brilliant way to evaluate the pacing of a text.
Because at the highest level of compression, you have a simple verbal group, like John 11.35, Jesus wept. A single aorist verb. It is a massive experiential compression, a decisive, perfective event right on the main line.
Right. And then moving down the scale, you have intermediate complexing, like the phased verbal complexes we discussed. He began to wash. You have mainline initiation coupled directly with offline duration.
And at the far end of the scale, you have maximum expansion. Clause nexuses, where entirely distinct propositions are chained together sequentially. When a pastor recognizes these gears shifting from rapid-fire compression to expansive, phased complexes, they are literally tracing the heartbeat and emphasis of the author.
You transition from merely translating the vocabulary to actually reading the discourse.
Yeah.
Systemic Functional Linguistics and verbal aspect rescue the Greek text from the pathology lab.
They really do.
They rebuild it into a dynamic, three-dimensional blueprint.
We've covered an immense amount of ground today, moving from the nesting dolls of the rank scale all the way to the camera angles of verbal aspect. But we want to leave you, our listeners, with something to wrestle with in your own studies this week.
A little homework.
Exactly. We've mapped out how the aorist drives the main line, how the imperfect takes us offline into the background, and how the historical present ruptures the distance to create a proximate spill.
So here is the challenge to consider this week. If these grammatical gears control the pacing, focus, and proximity of the narrative, what happens to that machinery when you reach the passion narrative?
Oh, that is a fantastic question.
Right. Open your Greek New Testament to John chapters 18 and 19. Analyze the trials before Pilate. Analyze the crucifixion itself. Does John compress the horror of the cross into rapid-fire perfective aorists, driving the main line relentlessly and mercifully forward? Or does he expand the suffering into deeply phased, offline, imperfective paraphrases, forcing the reader to linger in the dirt of agony?
Does he utilize a proximate spill when Pilate brings Jesus out wearing the crown of thorns? Does he yank the reader right onto the pavement?
Take these tools, sit down with the Greek text, and map the architecture of the cross for yourself. Observe how the theology is encoded directly into the syntax.
I can promise you, if you do that, you will never read the Passion narrative the same way again. The diagnostic muddy waters are officially cleared. The textual architecture is visible. Enjoy your exegesis this week, friends. We will see you next time.